The cold wind howled through the empty streets, carrying the sharp sting of winter. The moon hung high in the sky, casting pale light across the silent town. It was the kind of night that made you want to stay inside, where the warmth of a fire or the soft glow of a lamp could keep the chill at bay. But tonight, the streets held no comfort for the lone figure that wandered through them. She was an alien, a being of soft, pale blue skin, with delicate features that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. Her clothes, a mix of cloth and metallic elements, were barely enough to shield her from the biting cold. She had been walking for hours, knocking on door after door, hoping for shelter. But each door that opened greeted her with a look of fear and rejection. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but certainly not this. Her people, back on her home planet, had been driven away by enemies, and Earth had been her last hope. She had never expected her arrival here to be so difficult. But now, with each door that slammed in her face, the feeling of despair began to settle in her chest. As she approached yet another house, she paused, her breath visible in the frigid air. She could hear the sound of muffled voices coming from inside. She knocked once, then twice. Her knuckles stung with the cold, but she didn't pull away. There was nowhere else to go. She had no choice but to keep trying. The door opened a crack, and a pair of wide eyes peeked out from the darkness. The man inside didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, his gaze flicking over her strange features, her shimmering skin, and her unfamiliar appearance. She could see the hesitation in his eyes. She knew what he was thinking. What was she? Was she dangerous? I'm sorry to trouble you, she said, her voice soft but clear. I'm just looking for a place to stay for a while. I don't mean to cause any harm. The man stood frozen, still staring at her. There was a moment of silence, thick and heavy. She could feel the weight of his decision pressing on him. Finally, he shook his head and closed the door. Her heart sank. This was the 17th house, and once again she was left standing alone in the cold. She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself in a futile attempt to keep warm. Her thoughts began to race. How much longer could she keep this up? How much longer could she go on without shelter? She wasn't sure. Every knock on every door had been the same. Fear, suspicion, rejection. She had been told that Earth was supposed to be a place of refuge, but she had found nothing but walls. And the longer she stood there, the more those walls felt like they were closing in on her. Her feet dragged as she walked down the street, her body beginning to shake with cold. She didn't know how much further she could go. The night was endless, and the fear that had taken root in her heart was growing stronger with every passing minute. Her energy was fading. She needed a place to rest, but it seemed that no one on this planet was willing to help. She walked on, her mind foggy with exhaustion, her body numb from the cold. She didn't notice the passing houses, the flickering lights of distant street lamps, or the quiet hum of the town. All she could focus on was the chill that seeped into her bones and the growing sense of hopelessness that began to consume her. Then, just as she was about to give up, she saw it. A house at the end of the street, its windows aglow with warmth. It wasn't much, but it was something. She took a deep breath, willing herself to push forward one more time. This would be the last door. She made her way to the front of the house, her steps slower now, as if the weight of the night had finally caught up with her. Her breath was shallow, and her legs were shaky. She raised her hand, knocking softly against the wooden door. She didn't expect much this time, but it was all she had left. The door creaked open slowly. A man stood there, his face half lit by the light from inside. His expression was curious, cautious, but there was something different in his eyes. He didn't recoil or close the door immediately. Instead, he looked at her, really looked at her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The man's gaze drifted over her, pausing for a moment on her unusual features. She could see the hesitation in his eyes, the confusion and uncertainty. He wasn't sure what to make of her, but he didn't. "Pull away, can I help you?" he asked, his voice low, cautious. She didn't know what to say. She wasn't sure how to explain who she was or why she was here, or how she ended up standing on his doorstep in the cold. All she knew was that she needed help, and for once, she wasn't being turned away. "I'm lost," she said quietly. "I don't have anywhere to go. Please, may I stay for just a little while?" The man looked at her for a long time, and for a moment it felt like the world had stopped. He looked her in the eye, as if searching for something that would tell him whether he should let her in or turn her away. And then, with a small sigh, he stepped aside and held the door open wider. "You can come in," he said, his voice a little softer now, "but only for a little while." For the first time that night, the alien woman allowed herself to breathe, to relax just a little. Maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could rest. The warmth of the house enveloped her as she stepped inside, the door closing softly behind her. She had found shelter at last, not from fear, but from the kindness of a stranger. And in that moment she knew that perhaps Earth wasn't as cold and lonely as she had thought. The alien woman stepped cautiously into the house, her eyes taking in the simple yet warm surroundings. The man closed the door behind her. The sound of the wind outside fading into the background as the warmth of the room enveloped her. The fire crackled softly in the fireplace, and the scent of fresh bread lingered in the air. It was a small, cozy home, one that radiated a sense of peace that she hadn't felt in a long time. It was so different from the cold streets outside. The man didn't say anything for a few moments. He stood by the door, watching her closely. She could feel his eyes on her, but she didn't meet his gaze. Instead, she looked around the room, hoping that he would be the one to speak first. He finally broke the silence, his voice soft but filled with uncertainty. "Are you really an alien?" She nodded, her eyes flicking to his face briefly. "Yes," she said, her voice quiet, as if speaking too loudly would break the fragile trust between them. "I come from a faraway place, my people. We were forced to leave." The man didn't move, but he seemed to take a deep breath as if trying to process what she had said. She could see that he was struggling with his thoughts, trying to make sense of everything. It wasn't easy for him. He had never expected to meet an alien, and certainly not under these circumstances. You've never been to Earth before?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "No," she replied softly. "I've never been here before. I was trying to find a place to stay, a place where I could be safe. But no one would let me in." She could see his face soften a little, but he still didn't seem completely at ease. The silence grew between them, thick with the weight of the situation. He was trying to understand her, trying to make a decision about what to do next. He took a step closer to her, his voice more gentle now. "What exactly happened to you? Why are you on Earth?" She hesitated. The truth was difficult to share, but he had let her in, and there was something about his kindness that made her want to tell him. She took a deep breath and spoke. "I come from a planet far away," she began. "My people were once prosperous, but our enemies, they came for us. They destroyed everything we had. I was lucky to escape." She paused, looking away. "I ended up here on Earth. I thought it would be safe, but I was wrong." The man listened quietly, his expression serious. She could see that he was absorbing every word, his mind working through the details of her story. He wasn't sure what to believe, but there was something in her eyes that made him trust her. Maybe it was the exhaustion in her voice or the sadness that seemed to hang around her like a heavy fog. He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't know. But you're safe here for now. You can stay as long as you need, too." She felt a strange relief at his words. It was the first time since her arrival on Earth that she felt truly safe. She had been running for so long, always looking over her shoulder, never knowing who would turn against her next. But here in this small house, she was no longer alone. She was no longer a stranger. The man moved toward the fireplace, stoking the fire to make it burn brighter. He glanced over his shoulder at her. "I don't know what's out there, but if you need help, I'll do what I can." She looked at him, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in so long. There was no fear in his eyes, no suspicion. He had welcomed her without asking questions, without judging her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she mattered, like she was seen for who she was. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He gave her a small smile, the kind that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she had found a place to belong. "I don't know what's going to happen next," he said, "but you don't have to face it alone. I'll help you however I can." She nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude that made her heart ache. She had been running from the past for so long, but maybe, just maybe, the future could be different. The man gestured toward the small couch by the fireplace. "Sit down. Rest. You've been through a lot and you look like you need it." She hesitated for a moment, but then she nodded and walked over to the couch. She sank down into the soft cushions, finally allowing herself to relax. The warmth of the fire was soothing, and she closed her eyes for a moment, letting the exhaustion wash over her. For the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe again. The man stood by the fire, his back turned to her, but she could tell he was still thinking. He was trying to figure out what to do, what role he could play in this strange and difficult situation. She could see that he was kind, that he cared, but she didn't want to burden him with her problems. He had his own life, his own struggles. She had no right to drag him into her mess. But as the fire crackled in the hearth, she couldn't help but feel a spark of hope, a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Maybe there was a way out of this after all. Maybe Earth wasn't so cold and empty. Maybe it could be the place where she finally found peace. She closed her eyes again, letting herself rest. But this time, it was different. She was no longer alone in the darkness. The next morning, the sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden light through the windows of the small house. The alien woman woke up slowly, the warmth of the blankets wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. She blinked at the unfamiliar surroundings, the strange yet comforting feeling of safety still settling in her chest. It was hard to believe that she was here, inside this quiet home, away from the endless dangers she had faced. She glanced over at the man who had opened the door to her last night. He was sitting at the small wooden table, sipping a cup of coffee. His eyes met hers as she stirred, and a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "You're up early," he said, his voice warm. "I wasn't sure if you'd be sleeping all day." The alien woman stretched her arms, still feeling the lingering ache from her long walk the night before. Her body had grown tired from the stress and the cold, but there was something different about waking up here. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't have to worry about being hunted or rejected. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I didn't expect to sleep so well." The man set his cup down and stood up, walking over to a small counter where a pot of tea waited. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," he added. "There's food and water, and I can make more tea if you'd like. You look like you could use it." The alien woman nodded, her eyes following his every movement. She was grateful, more than she could express in words. She had no idea why he had chosen to help her, but in that moment it didn't matter. He had given her the chance to rest, to recover. "I don't know what to do now," she admitted, her voice soft. "I don't even know where to go." The man didn't say anything at first. He picked up a small teapot and began to pour the tea into 2 cups. After a moment, he placed one of the cups in front of her and sat down at the table, across from her. "You don't have to decide everything right away," he said. "We can take things one step at a time. You're safe here, at least for now." The alien woman looked down at the tea in front of her. She had never tasted anything like it before, but it smelled warm and soothing, like something that could help ease the worries swirling in her mind. She wrapped her fingers around the cup, feeling the warmth seep into her cold hands. "Thank you," she said again, this time her voice quieter, more sincere. "You don't have to do this. I'm not like you. I'm different. I'm an alien." The man smiled slightly, his eyes softening. "I figured as much. But different doesn't mean dangerous, does it? You haven't tried to hurt me." She hesitated, her mind drifting back to the darkness of her past. There had been so many moments when she had been forced to fight, to defend herself from those who didn't understand her. But this man wasn't like them. He hadn't raised a weapon against her. He hadn't turned her away. And for that, she was grateful beyond words. "No," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I'm not dangerous. I just want to survive. I just want to find a place where I can be safe." The man nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "You've found that here, for now. And if you need help, I'll do what I can. I don't know much about your world or what's going on, but you're not alone." The alien woman didn't know how to respond to that. She had never been treated this way before. For as long as she could remember, she had been running, hiding and fighting for her life. There had always been fear in the air, always the weight of distrust. But here, in this small house, with this kind and simple man, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The silence between them was comfortable, not awkward. She sipped her tea slowly, savoring the warmth as it spread through her. It was a small comfort, but it meant more to her than she could explain. After a moment, the man stood up and walked to the small window. "I'll need to go into town later, get some more supplies, maybe see if I can find out anything about what's been going on with you." He paused, glancing over his shoulder at her. "If you want, you can come with me, or stay here and rest more. Whatever you feel comfortable with." The alien woman thought about it. She was still exhausted, her body still recovering from the long journey, but the idea of stepping outside, of seeing more of Earth, made her feel a little more connected to this strange new world. "I'll come with you," she said, setting her cup down and standing up. "I need to see more of this place. I need to understand it." The man nodded, his expression warm. "All right, we'll take it slow. No rush." He motioned for her to follow him, and the two of them walked toward the door. As they stepped outside, into the cool morning air, the alien woman felt a strange sense of gratitude settle in her chest. It wasn't just the warmth of the house, or the tea, or even the safety. It was the kindness of this man. A kindness she had never expected to find on Earth. The town was quiet, still waking up. The streets were mostly empty, with only a few people going about their business. The alien woman glanced around, taking in the sights, the sounds, and the smells of Earth. Everything was so new to her, so strange, and yet, for the first time, in a long time, she felt like she might belong. The man led her through the town, explaining the basics of life on Earth, pointing out the things she needed to know. She listened intently, trying to absorb every detail. Her mind raced with questions, but for once she wasn't afraid to ask. She wasn't afraid to be curious. As they walked, the man spoke again, his voice light. "You're not the first stranger I've helped, you know. I've always believed that there's more to people than what you see on the surface. Sometimes it's the ones who are different that need the most help." The alien woman smiled softly, feeling a sense of warmth spread through her. She had always been different, and now, for the first time, it felt like that wasn't a burden. "Thank you," she said again, her voice full of meaning. The man glanced at her, offering a small smile in return. "You're welcome. Let's see what we can do to help you feel at home here." The day passed slowly. The alien woman and the human man wandered through the quiet town, with him showing her the small details of life on Earth. The streets were calm, and the sun shone softly, casting a golden hue over the buildings and the trees. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of flowers and distant smoke from chimneys. It was a peaceful scene, one that seemed far removed from the turmoil and fear the alien woman had fled. She learned more about Earth's culture, the people, and the way things worked. The man explained simple things: how to use the town's communication system, the different types of food people ate, and the basic customs of the world she now found herself in. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of normalcy, a feeling of safety that she had almost forgotten. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, the peaceful day began to feel too good to be true. They were walking back to the man's house when the atmosphere around them shifted. The air grew thicker, heavier, and the sound of footsteps began to echo in the distance. The alien woman's senses heightened. She stopped in her tracks, her eyes darting around, scanning for anything out of the ordinary. She could feel something. Something dangerous was close. The man noticed her sudden tension. What is it? He asked, his voice low, though his concern was evident. I don't know, she replied, her voice tight. Something's not right. Just then, the sound of distant vehicles came to her ears. She glanced up and saw dark figures moving toward them down the road. The alien woman's breath quickened. She knew who these people were. Her enemies. The man, sensing her fear, instinctively reached for the small pouch on his belt. But the alien woman stopped him with a single gesture. No, she said urgently. They're not here for you. You must stay inside. Please. They will not hesitate to hurt you if you're caught in the open. Without another word, she turned and began to run, pulling him with her toward the nearest alleyway. She moved quickly, her steps sure and fast, but her mind was racing. Her enemies were closing in. The time for hiding was over. They would come for her, and this time she wouldn't be able to avoid them. The man followed her, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what was happening, but the alien woman's fear was contagious. He could feel the weight of the danger that was approaching, and he knew that something serious was unfolding. He couldn't help but wonder just who these enemies were, and why they were chasing her. As they reached the alley, the alien woman pushed the man toward the shadows and motioned for him to stay quiet. She peered around the corner, her sharp eyes scanning the road ahead. There were at least 6 or 7 figures, tall and menacing, dressed in dark clothing. Their movements were controlled, purposeful, as though they were searching for something, or someone. They're here, she whispered, and they know I'm nearby. The man stood frozen in place, his heart racing. He had no idea how to react. His mind was spinning with questions, but the only thing he could focus on was the alien woman's warning. What do we do now? He asked quietly, his voice trembling. The alien woman's eyes were full of determination, but there was also an edge of regret in them. We wait. They can't know where we are yet. If we move too soon, they'll spot us. For a long time, they stood there in the dark alley. The only sounds the distant rumble of the approaching figures and the alien woman's steady breathing. The tension was unbearable. She could feel the weight of every second stretching out, making every moment feel like an eternity. Finally, the figures passed, just a few feet away. The alien woman's heart raced in her chest as she watched them go. She didn't dare make a sound, her body tense and still. She had spent too much of her life on the run to make mistakes now. Her enemies were clever. If they caught even the slightest hint of her, they would hunt her down without mercy. Once the figures had passed, the alien woman exhaled slowly, her body relaxing just slightly. She turned to the man, her eyes dark with concern. We can't. Stay here, she said urgently. They'll know we're close now. They'll search this area until they find us. The man looked at her, his face pale with fear. What are we supposed to do? Where can we go? She hesitated. She had hoped that she could find a safer place, a place where she wouldn't have to drag him into danger. But there was no choice. If she didn't confront her enemies soon, they would keep coming after her, and they would hurt anyone who got in their way. There's a safe place, she said, her voice steady. But it's far. We'll have to move quickly, and I don't know if we can outrun them. But it's the only option. Without waiting for a response, she grabbed the man's arm and pulled him with her. They moved through the narrow streets, taking alley after alley, hoping to lose the enemies who were now in pursuit. The man followed, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been in a situation like this before, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to face whatever was waiting for them. The alien woman kept her pace steady, focused on their escape. She had been running from danger for so long, but this time it felt different. She wasn't just running for herself. She was running for the man who had shown her kindness, and she wasn't going to let her enemies hurt him. They didn't stop until they reached the outskirts of the town, where a small wooded area provided them with some cover. The alien woman turned to the man, her breath ragged, her face pale. She could hear the distant sounds of their enemies closing in, but for now they were hidden. We're safe for the moment, she said, her voice low. But we can't stay here for long. The man nodded, though he didn't speak. He was still processing everything that had happened, still trying to understand the gravity of the situation. All he knew for certain was that he didn't want to lose her, And he didn't want to see her face any more danger, especially not because of him. "Let's move quickly," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We don't have much time." Together, they began to move deeper into the woods, hoping that this new place, whatever it was, would offer them the safety they so desperately needed. "We've put some distance between us, but we can't let our guard down. They'll be looking for us." The man nodded and sat down on a nearby rock, catching his breath. He hadn't realized how much his body had been pushed, but now that they had stopped, he could feel every muscle aching. "You're really not from Earth, are you?" he asked, his voice quiet. You don't look like anything I've seen before." She looked at him, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "I'm not from here," she said softly. "I'm from a distant planet, a place far beyond this world. I never expected to be here. I never expected to need help." The man nodded slowly, understanding the weight in her words. "You don't have to explain everything to me," he said, his voice reassuring. "I don't need to know where you're from. I just know you need help, and I'm not going to leave you." The alien woman looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. She had spent so much of her life running, hiding, fighting, that she had forgotten what it was like to have someone truly stand by her side. She had always been alone, always keeping her distance, but here, with this man, it was different. He wasn't scared of her. He wasn't afraid to help. "I don't know how to repay you for this," she said, her voice soft with gratitude. "I never expected kindness like this." The man smiled, though it was tinged with worry. "You don't need to repay me, I just want you to be safe." Just as the words left his mouth, a rustling sound broke the stillness of the clearing. The alien woman's eyes snapped to the side, her body immediately tense. The man followed her gaze. The men were almost on them now. The alien woman could hear their breath, their voices, as they moved closer. She had only seconds to make a decision. Without warning, she reached into a hidden pocket in her clothing and pulled out a small device. It was sleek and metallic, something she had carried with her for years but had never used. She had always hoped she wouldn't need it. But now, with her enemies just a few feet away, she had no choice. The man looked at her in confusion, his eyes wide. "What is that?" The alien woman didn't answer. Instead, she pressed a small button on the device. A low hum filled the air, and the ground beneath them seemed to vibrate. In an instant, a protective shield surrounded them, a faint, translucent barrier that shimmered in the sunlight. The alien woman held her breath, waiting. The figures moved closer, their voices getting louder. They were almost within arm's reach when they suddenly stopped, as if they had hit an invisible wall. The leader of the group stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he reached out to touch the shield. "This won't stop us forever," he growled, his voice full of venom. "We'll find you wherever you go. You can't hide." The alien woman's grip on the device tightened, her expression hardening. "I'm not hiding," she said, her voice cold and determined. "I'm protecting." The man looked at her, his eyes wide with amazement. You can do this?" The alien woman didn't answer. She didn't need to. The shield was strong enough to keep them safe for now, but she knew it wouldn't last forever. They had to keep moving. "Stay behind me," she said softly, her gaze never leaving the men outside the shield. "And don't stop running, not until we're far enough away." The protective shield hummed faintly around them, a shimmering barrier that kept the alien woman and the man safe for the moment. The figures outside, their faces twisted with frustration, stared at the shield, unwilling to give up. The alien woman's heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from the certainty that time was running out. The shield could only hold for so long. She glanced at the man beside her, his face pale, eyes wide with confusion. She could see the fear in his expression, but there was something else too. Determination. He wasn't backing down. Not now. Not with her. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice steady despite the chaos outside. "When the shield fails, we run. Keep up with me no matter what." The man nodded quickly, his hands clenched into fists. "I'm not leaving you," he said, his voice firm. He didn't understand everything about what was happening, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let her face this alone. Not after everything she had done for him. The alien woman gave him a quick, grateful look before turning her attention back to the figures outside. The leader of the group had stepped back, clearly frustrated. He waved his hand toward the others, issuing orders. They were preparing for something. A bigger attack. Get ready, the alien woman muttered, her mind already working through their next move. The shield wouldn't last much longer, and she needed to find a way to get them both out of here. Do you have a plan? The man asked, quietly, his eyes scanning the area. The alien woman didn't answer at first. She was too focused, too deep in thought. But after a moment, she turned to him. We're going to fight back, it's the only way. The man blinked, taken aback. Fight back, but they're armed, we don't even know what they can do. I know, she said, her voice low but determined. But we can't run forever. We have to take a stand. She reached for another device from her belt, something smaller and less noticeable than the shield generator, but just as important. It was a small weapon, sleek and deadly, designed for close-range defense. She had been trained to use it in extreme situations, but she had never imagined she would be using it like this, on Earth with a human by her side. As she activated the weapon, a soft, humming sound filled the air, followed by a sharp, crackling energy. The weapon glowed faintly, a dangerous sign of its power. The man watched her, his eyes wide. What is that? Can you use it? I have to, she said, her voice steady. And so do you. When the shield drops, we don't hesitate. The sound of the shield flickering out of existence echoed through the woods. The alien woman's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't flinch. She was ready. The man's hand was on her shoulder, his eyes locked with hers, a silent promise that he would stand with her. And then, just as the shield disappeared, entirely, the figures outside sprang into action. The leader barked an order, and the group rushed toward them, weapons raised. Now, the alien woman commanded, and she surged forward, her weapon in hand. She moved with precision, her years of training kicking in as she aimed the weapon at the approaching figures. The first man was close, too close, and before he could raise his own weapon, she fired. A burst of energy shot from the weapon, striking him square in the chest. He collapsed instantly, the shock wave from the blast throwing him back into the trees. The man beside her flinched at the noise, but he didn't hesitate. He grabbed a fallen branch from the ground, wielding it like a club. His actions were wild, but there was a strength in him she hadn't seen before. It was the strength of someone who wouldn't give up, not even when faced with impossible odds. Stay close, she called to him as she moved to the next attacker. The alien woman fired, again, this time taking down another one of the pursuers. The crackling energy of the weapon lit up the darkness, casting eerie shadows around them. But even as she took down one enemy after another, she could feel her strength beginning to wane. The energy from the weapon was draining, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep it up. The man was still fighting, his eyes wide with fear, but his determination never faltered. He swung the branch again, knocking another enemy off balance. The alien woman glanced at him, surprised at how well he was holding his own. He caught her gaze and gave her a small, encouraging smile. I'm not leaving you. Not now. For a moment, the alien woman's heart softened. She had never imagined that a human, someone so different from her, could be so brave, so strong. But the fight wasn't over yet. Another figure appeared in the shadows, moving quickly, silently. This one was different, faster, more dangerous. The alien woman didn't see him until it was almost too late. He lunged at her, his weapon raised high. She barely managed to dodge in time, the weapon grazing her side as she stepped out of the way. Pain shot through her body, but she didn't have time to react. The man was already charging at the attacker, his eyes blazing with fury. No, she shouted, reaching out to stop him, but it was too late. The man swung the branch with all his strength, knocking the enemy off balance. The attacker stumbled, momentarily disoriented, and the man used the opportunity to grab a fallen rock and slam it into the enemy's chest. The alien woman watched in shock as the man fought back with everything he had. It wasn't graceful, but it was effective. The attacker fell to the ground, defeated. The alien woman stepped forward, her breath shallow from the pain in her side. She aimed her weapon once more, taking out the last remaining attacker, and then it was over. The forest fell silent again, the sounds of the battle replaced by the quiet rustle of leaves in the wind. The man and the alien woman stood together in the clearing, panting from the exertion. The alien woman looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise and admiration. You saved me." The man gave a shaky smile, his chest heaving with each breath. "We saved each other." For a moment, neither of them said anything. They were both exhausted, their bodies bruised and sore. But there was a sense of relief in the air. The danger had passed for now. But the alien woman knew that it wasn't over. Not yet. Her enemies would be back, and they wouldn't stop until they had her. But for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone in the fight. She had someone by her side. And that, she realized, was the most powerful weapon of all. The forest was quiet now. The only sounds, the soft rustling of the leaves and the distant call of birds. The alien woman stood in the middle of the clearing, her eyes scanning the surroundings, still alert, still ready. But the danger had passed. Her enemies were defeated, lying unconscious or in some cases worse. The threat had been neutralized for now. She glanced over at the human man, who was still catching his breath. His clothes were torn, his face dirty from the fight, but there was a look in his eyes that made her feel a sense of warmth. He had fought beside her, had protected her, even though he had no idea what he was getting into. She hadn't expected him to fight, not in this way, but here he was, brave and strong. For the first time in a long time, the alien woman felt a sense of peace. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. She wasn't alone anymore. The man wiped his brow, looking at her with a tired but satisfied expression. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice hoarse from the fight. "For now," she replied. "They won't give up easily, but we have time. We need to rest, to regroup." The man nodded. He was still processing everything that had happened. Just hours ago, he had been living his quiet, peaceful life, and now he was fighting alongside an alien woman, facing threats he couldn't even begin to understand. But there was something in the way she moved, the way she fought, that made him want to stand by her. She had shown him kindness, and now he had returned the favor. They sat down on a nearby log, the adrenaline of the fight slowly leaving their bodies. The man winced as he leaned back, feeling the bruises on his arms and legs. The alien woman, too, seemed tired, her usual composure showing cracks from the strain of the battle. She had fought hard, but the injuries from her escape were still fresh, and she couldn't ignore the pain in her side. "You're hurt," the man said gently, noticing the way she winced as she moved. "Let me help you." The alien woman shook her head. "I'll be fine. I'm used to it. It's just a scratch." But the man wasn't convinced. "You don't have to do everything on your own. You've been through a lot." She paused, her gaze softening as she looked at him. She had always been alone, always keeping her distance from others, afraid that anyone who got too close would only bring more danger. But here he was, offering his help, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely cared. "I'm not used to this," she said quietly. "I've always been alone." The man sat beside her, offering her a reassuring smile. "Well, you're not alone now, and I don't plan on letting you face everything by yourself." For a moment, the alien woman said nothing. She simply watched him, trying to process the weight of his words. She had never allowed anyone to be this close to her, never trusted anyone enough to let them in. But somehow, with him, it felt different. Maybe it was because he had shown her something she hadn't seen in years: compassion, trust, and even a willingness to fight for something bigger than himself. She exhaled softly and nodded. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say," he replied. "You don't need to say anything. We're in this together, okay?" The alien woman smiled, a small but genuine smile that reached her eyes. She hadn't smiled in a long time, and it felt good to do so. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could face it without fear. They stayed there for a while, resting in the quiet of the forest. The man didn't ask any more questions. He didn't need to. They both knew that their journey was far from over, but they also knew that they would face it together. The bond between them, forged in the heat of battle, was strong. And it would only grow stronger as time went on. Finally, after a while, the alien woman stood up, stretching her tired muscles. The man followed suit, dusting himself off. "We need to move," she said, her voice steady again. "We can't stay here forever. They'll come looking for us." The man nodded, his expression serious. "Where do we go next?" She hesitated, looking around the forest. There was a place, a hidden base deep in the mountains where she could rest and regroup. It was a place she had used in the past, a safe haven from the chaos that had followed her. But she wasn't sure if it was still safe. The enemies who pursued her were powerful, and they would stop at nothing to track her down. But it was the only place she could think of. "I know a place," she said finally. "But it's far. We'll need to travel for days, maybe even longer. It's the only option we have." The man looked at her, determination in his eyes. "I'll go wherever you go. We'll make it together." The alien woman's heart skipped, a beat at his words. She had always been the one to protect others, the one who fought alone. But now, with him by her side, she didn't feel like she had to do everything on her own. Together, they were stronger. She gave him a nod, her face set with resolve. "Then we move out. We'll go to the place I know. It's the safest place we can reach. After that, we'll figure out what comes next." The two of them stood side by side, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. The alien woman had spent so long running from her past, but now, with the human man by her side, she felt like she could finally face it. Together, they would fight for survival. And, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. They started walking side by side through the quiet forest, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would face it together.